Hello, everybody, and welcome to the houseatwork.com Home Repair Clinic podcast. My name's Jim Salmon, along with Peter Schick. Good morning, sir.
Howdy.
Or good afternoon, or
Good
whatever
afternoon.
it is, because,
Yeah,
you know,
Yes,
I shouldn't say what time of the day it is, because people then,
Yeah.
who knows what time they're listening to
it
the
could
podcast.
be like the middle. It could be like 2 a.m.
There you
or
go.
whatever, Yeah.
Well, anyway, hello, everybody. We are going to talk home repair. And we also have a website where you can go and send us an email if you'd like to, there's a particular topic you'd like to talk about, or, send us a question. And Peter's going to tell you what that is.
Yep. Just send us any questions you want us to talk about at contactus@houseatwork.com.
All right. Today, this subject of this podcast is pests. Now, I'm not talking about your wife or your girlfriend or
Not
whatever.
talking about you, Jim.
Yeah. Or particular people you know in your life. We're talking about pests that try to get into your house. And it is you versus them. It's the mice. It's the carpenter ants. It's in certain parts of the country, including here, it's termites. It can be raccoons, groundhogs, and whatever. I bought a rental house. I bought a rental house a few years ago, and there were 5 little baby groundhogs that were living in this crawl space. And my buddy, the plumber, would drive by, and he goes, "Yeah, your whole family, he's needling me. Your whole family of groundhogs is out front eating your grass." So it's you versus the pests. And our goal with this podcast is to try to talk you down off the ledge on some of that stuff. I'm a firm believer in do-it-yourself, but when you get in trouble with termites or carpenter ants, it's off the wall.
That's starting to become that would be a major issue. And it really depends on how far along it is. So say if it's just, hey, I have a trail of ants going through my kitchen or whatever. Hey, find out where they're going and get rid of the food source is typically the first thing you want to do.
Right.
If it's actually these termites or carpenter ants are burrowing into the wood in your house, now that's a whole other issue.
It's another matter.
That's a whole other problem. That's a whole other, you need to take completely different considerations with that.
Now, what I do for a living is I'm a home inspector. You hire me to go inspect a house before you sign off finally on it and buy the house. And I don't too many times get to find where the carpenter ant nest is. But once in a while, I get lucky. And they need a food source, and they need water. And the band joist area in the basement, sometimes I'll take my little probe and flick some insulation aside, and there's 50,000 ants up in there.
Oh, really? So they'll actually make a colony within the house.
There's a colony somewhere. Now, It doesn't necessarily mean it's in the house. It can be in a stump out in the backyard or a particular tree.
That's what I've seen a lot of is you'll see the ants, they'll have a colony in the backyard or close to the house.
Right.
And then they send their little scout guys inside, find food, and then, of course, they leave their little trail, their pheromone trail. It's like a little... Pretty much they leave these chemicals on the ground for their buddies to follow
along.
And then get the food and bring it back. And,
One of the more fun things that I've seen in my career is there'll be a telephone line. Old landline phones are a phone line is like a flat strip of wire, and it goes from the pole over to the house. And I'm looking up there, and you see carpenter ants, one right after another. They're about 1/4 of an inch apart, and there's 5,000 of them, and they're heading right in on that landline. And, in the previous podcast, we were talking about siding and holes and rot and whatever.
Yep.
They'll find entry points and get in there. And the thing with carpenter ants that separates them from termites is carpenter ants don't eat the wood. They
just burrow.
They burrow in it to nest. And so you'll see these little piles of, it looks to me like in the old days when we sharpened our pencil in school.
Yep.
And you dump that out. It's called carpenter ant frass.
Yep.
And that looks just like that.
Now, carpenter ants are larger than most other ants. Say, like...
Yes, if it's a mature colony, yes. But they start out small to begin with.
Okay.
So it isn't always people will look at that ant and they'll go, okay, that's not a carpenter ant because it's too small. Well, hold on a minute.
Fire ants are there's not many fire ants here, but like say in the South or something, a lot more fire ants. Those are tiny little guys.
And they bite too.
Yeah, and they hurt. The carpenter ants, you usually say they're around, I'd say maybe 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 to maybe 1/2 inch if they're a really
The
big
biggest
guy.
ones are about 1/2 inch. Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, the thing with carpenter ants is that you can't always find a nest. Neither can the home inspector or neither can the pest guy.
exterminator,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what they do is they treat. And like every other cycle of life, there's the nest and the egg or whatever, and then they're born, and then the cocoon and all that other stuff. So you have to treat it once per quarter for proper carpenter ant treatments, and it's usually $300 or $400 a shot. So you're spending $1,000 to $1,500.
I'll even go over for any pest, whether it's a mouse, whether it's ants, whether whatever. This is what the exterminator does.
Yeah.
They seal out where they're coming in, they put poison down, and then that's pretty much it.
There you go.
And then they say, give me $300.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In our area of the world, which the Northeast, Western New York, we don't have a lot of the California termites here. We do have some subterranean.
Actually,
termites.
I was going to ask you about that because I haven't seen much. I've seen carpenter ant damage, but I haven't seen termites. I haven't seen too many of them, at least here upstate New York.
I have a termite map, if you will, that I didn't make it. One of the local pest guys made it. And, of course, I plagiarized it and stole it from me. And I said, oh, yeah, look at my map. But anyway, in and around Rochester, New York, where we are here, there's a town called Irondequoit. And on Ridge Road, going a mile or so towards Lake Ontario, there is a cluster of subterranean termite damage. And
Interesting.
I was in this one house doing a home inspection, and the pest guy was there doing his thing at the same time. And he said, Jim, come over here and look at this. And there was a 4-foot by 4-foot section in the corner of the subfloor that was just eaten away. They had also gotten into the stair stringer going down to the basement and had eaten away the left-hand stair stringer. And you could push on it with your finger, and it was like wallpaper.
Oh, jeez.
So
it was like balsa wood.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And unlike carpenter ants, termites eat the wood. They digest it for some reason. So my goal is to put as much pressure treated to them as I could. But anyway, those repairs are not only killing the termite colony or whatever you call it, but it's also repairing the damage that they've done. And sometimes carpenter ants will do the same thing.
I can't imagine the remediation, because especially if there's the colony that's inside the house and it's the termites, getting rid of them at that point. I mean, first you got to get rid of them, then you have to do all the remediation.
Right.
And I can only imagine the remediation for that.
Well, out in California and the South and other parts of where climates are different and they have different types of termites, they tent the whole property, and then they spray it, and you're out of there for hours anyway, if not days, and it's supposed to kill them all. Now, that's ungodly expensive work.
Yeah.
So
not to mention
that's why we live here in New York.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. My goal as a home inspector is I'm not a pest inspector, so I'm not doing a pest inspection. But sometimes that damage crosses into my world.
Yeah, and you just got to report it. It's like, hey, by the way, I'm seeing a carpenter ant colony here, so maybe you should talk to a pest guy.
The other thing is rodent activity, and mice are a nightmare sometimes, and especially around September.
Yep. When it starts cooling.
Yeah,
off.
Their goal is to get warm too.
Yep.
And I'm always nitpicking about the electrical panel box and all those little knockouts in there. And if you don't have those in place, the mice get in there because that's a nice warm spot.
Another thing is
crazy
little windows in the basement. Like if you don't have glass blocks, say you have like those old kind of swinging windows in the basement.
The old metal ones?
Yeah, the old metal ones. You have a little gap. It doesn't take much. Yep. Doesn't take much. They'll get in through that.
A mouse can get through 1/4 of an inch.
Yep.
And the smaller they are, the smaller
they'll squeeze right through it.
Yep. I did some research not all that long ago because I'm adept at this whole show prep thing. A mouse cycle is 21 days between fornication and being born. So it's 21 days.
Within 3 weeks, they could already be multiplying.
Right, and they can have up to 20 babies. So you think
geez.
about that. I mean, there's a certain percentage that won't live and whatever. They're all over the place. Certain types of insulation in your home, like blown-in cellulose, blown-in fiberglass, old rock wool, and sometimes even, regular fiberglass bats and rolls and so forth. The mice love that.
Oh, yeah, they'll make their little nests in that. And I think one of the big things you got to look for too is a lot of the time they'll come in through the basement or they'll find some way, and now you have, say, your the pipes coming up to your sink in your kitchen,
Right.
and say there's no, they don't, the good stuff, it's actually called the good
stuff, yeah.
the spray foam that's not put in there, and actually they'll chew right through that, and you got to use steel wool.
Yeah, I see steel wool and
Yeah.
sometimes Brillo pads jammed in there or whatever.
Yeah, and you got that's probably one way you could treat it yourself. You find any of these small little gaps, or you find any of these little potential entry points around your house, put steel wool in there. They won't be able to chew through that.
There is closed cell polyurethane foam you can get too. That works. It's a lot harder than regular, but they still, if they have tenacity, they can get through that. And silicone works good too to try to seal things out. You were right in saying that one of the big things that you can do to keep mice out of your house is to exclude them, and that's not always as easy as you thought. You have to lay on your side and look up along your foundation wall outside.
And
caulking, and
you got to really know what you're looking for too. I mean, I've seen it a few times, and I see the exterminator going around the house, and you'll just find a tiny crack. It's like they will get through
there
that.
You go.
And puts the steel wool in there. I'm like, oh wow, okay, so that's what I'm looking for, is anything like that. All right.
I have a million, as you do, real estate stories. I have a million home inspector stories. I'm standing. This wasn't all that long ago either. A few months ago, I'm standing in a basement. It's an older lady thinking of selling her house, and a lot of my clients hire me to inspect the house before it's in the real estate transaction, just to find out what the deal is. You know. So we're standing in the basement, and I'm going and looking at the insulation in the band joist area right above the foundation, and there's all these little tube holes where mice have been in there. And I said, gee, there's a lot of rodent activity here. And she said, no, I don't have any mice. And just as she said that, right behind her head, come out of the insulation, stuck the head of a mouse, and I broke out laughing. And she goes, What are you laughing at? And I said, well, just as you were talking about that, there was a mouse head. No, you're kidding me. It's like really funny. Mice, you can't find them either. Once they get in that stuff, the only way to deal with that is bait it. And then there's the smell thing.
Yeah, they dive behind a wall or something. And
snakes. Snakes all the time. Milk snakes. We were talking about that in another podcast. But it was I was in a house once where there were milk snakes all over the place. The brown and white ones, they're striped, and they get in through a half-inch little gap somewhere. The culprit a lot of times is the front step where it butts up against there. A lot of people don't know those areas are rotted, and the snake figures out how to get in there.
I've seen that, and also chipmunks get in that way too. Yeah.
So it's all about exclusion. You're absolutely right with that.
The exclusion piece, and then once you exclude them, you could start baiting it. And I think that's really the process: exclusion, baiting at that point.
A couple other quick, interesting stories. I'm on a stairway going up to the second floor. My client is an older lady, and she's kind of right behind me. And right at the top of the stairway is a door that gets me into a knee wall attic. I open the door. Now, bear in mind, she's right behind me, a step or two down. And I open this door, and out comes a squirrel. And he comes out, he runs around me, behind me, and then around and back in the hole, right? And it stunned me, right? So I go backwards, I run into her. She kind of falls backwards and grabs a hold of the railing. It was really funny.
I got a really good story. That just reminded me of this. So one of the things I do is I also rent out apartments. So if I have a client, like a lot of the time I work with
property management.
Yeah, property management. And sometimes I'll have a client and they'll be like, hey, can you rent out these apartments? I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I can do it. So there's this place downtown that I'm renting out. And I find a guy for it. It's like a small, it's a studio, like $500 a month kind of thing.
Right.
I rent it out to him. We do the lease signing, everything great. He has a cat too. So I'm like, okay, cool. Awesome. Done. A few weeks later, he calls me up. He's like, I'm done. I'm moving out. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, something chewed through the wall, attacked my cat, ate all of its food and left. So we found out. Oh,
It was a rat, right?
It was a raccoon.
A raccoon.
A raccoon. Because just imagine this: a raccoon chewed through the wall.
That's great.
Came in like the cat was probably hissing or whatever at it.
Right.
Attacked it. He had to take the cat to the vet. I mean, it got like really hurt by whatever this was.
Yeah, raccoons are tough.
Yeah.
Boy, they'll
I mean,
fight you to the death.
They're nasty. They are nasty. Really hurt this cat, ate all the cat's food, and then just disappeared.
That's great.
It just
Raccoons oftentimes live in chimneys. And so I'm up on a roof and I'm taking my flashlight and shining it down into the chimney.
and
Every once in a while, they're right there.
Yeah.
And they don't stay there either. They come right out.
They'll come running at you.
That was nuts. I there's some stories on that, too. Red squirrels are the worst form of squirrel vermin that you can come up with.
Now, why would you say red squirrels?
Because they're small, they're rat-like, and they can get into smaller openings, and they're extremely destructive. Now, I respect the big gray squirrels and the flying squirrels, and there's black squirrels out there.
Yep.
They're absolutely beautiful, and they have they're in the woods, and they have a season of hunting, and they're valuable.
I got a good gray
Red squirrel
squirrel
now,
story for you after you talk about
Well,
the reds.
yesterday morning, my goal is to get them all, and yesterday morning, I shot myself my 27th red squirrel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. There you go.
It's me versus them. It's you versus them.
No, you gotta take care of it. Actually, talking about squirrels, there's a place that we had a house and we were remodeling it. And it had above the front porch was kind of like a little roof, and it had a little roof over the front porch. And there's a big hole that some critters chewed through in the corner, in between the roof and then the house. And so there are some critters living right below the roof there. And so we put out a trap, kind of like, and it's not like it's not a trap that kills it. It's one of those live traps. The
I have a
wire
heart
cage.
type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, one of those. And so it turned out there were some squirrels living in there, and it caught one of the gray squirrels. And it was funny. We come there, like, oh, we got the squirrel. And then we see on the other side of the trap, there's another squirrel just sitting outside the cage. He was just hanging out there, and he wouldn't leave his buddy. It was like he was just staying there right next to his buddy. I'm like, oh, that sucks. His buddy got caught.
Don't tell me you let it go. Come on, I'm begging you. Well, my wife doesn't like me to kill stuff. The red squirrels.
Oh, my wife's the same way.
They really aggravate. Yeah.
Come on. Meh, meh, meh.
So I take the chipmunks and stuff. I take them 5 miles away and drop them off.
That's what we did
then
with the gray squirrel.
A guy told me, he said, that's not far enough. They'll come back on you.
They'll come back.
Well, I'm not going to drive to Toronto to let the...
Exactly, yeah.
And it's in New York State. It's against the law to, trap this stuff, throw it in your car, and take it somewhere. It's against the law. So, not that...
I want to see
I'd let that bother me or slow me down.
I want to see the cop that's going to ticket you for having a squirrel. Yeah. Like, well, you're in violation of code, whatever the heck that is. Yeah,
the Wild Kingdom Act or something. But anyway, if you're going to transport them, you got to take them a long ways away. I have another woods I'd take them at about 5 miles away, which
I took them to a park. I'm trying to remember which park it was. It was outside of. It was probably on the edge of Monroe County. I know it was way, way out there. I forget the name of the park. I just let them go.
Now we've had a problem this year, and the last couple of years actually, with these box elder bugs.
Oh yeah,
millions and millions of them. They have this kind of orange star on their back, or red sometimes.
Yep.
And they're a beetle that is supposed to be harmless, but they're a big-time nuisance. I mean, we had a big problem with them in our sunroom, and I'd vacuum up 100 of them at a time. Every day?
Yeah, I've seen that, and then I want to say 2 years ago, we had issues with shield bugs too, or shield stink bugs. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Those guys.
Stink bugs they stink.
Yeah. I remember we had that too, and it was at the same time when it started getting warmer, like that transition of the seasons. We started seeing them popping up.
A few years ago, it was ladybugs, a version of the ladybugs.
Yep.
There were millions and billions of those. I called Cornell Cooperative Extension to get an idea of what their suggestion would be on how to eliminate them. And whoever a professor guy I got on the phone said, just vacuum them up and take them outside and let them go. And I go, no, I want to mow them down by the hundreds of thousands. I want to use the phasers. I want to hang them. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's crazy.
Don't kill the bugs, man.
Well, I've not had real good luck with health department or Cornell, but we had it's a long story, but there was a dog tied up on the farm across the street. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I heard this commotion, little kids running around, and there was a raccoon in the tree during the day.
Oh, wow.
So that's not a good thing.
I got another raccoon story like that.
So I go over there and I take my 12 gauge and I dispatch the raccoon.
Yeah.
He falls down. The dog grabs him. The kid runs over and starts petting the dog. And, and I go, this can't be happening
so
to
much
me.
worse.
You just made so I'm trying to get the people out there to get the kid away, to get the dog away, to whatever. So I call the health department. I said, okay, this is what happens. And it was the day before Labor Day. Labor Day was on a Saturday or something, and it was a Friday. And the guy actually said this, and I quote, "Put it in a garbage bag and put it in your freezer, because we'll come and pick it up on Monday." And
why would I do that?
I hung up on him. I'm not going to put
that. Who does that?
Rabid raccoon.
Let me put a wild raccoon into my freezer with all of my other food. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a terrible idea at all. This was actually the other week. I was walking my dog, and it was pretty early morning. It was like around 6-ish kind of deal. And I'm walking, and I'm kind of in a suburban area. I'm not like out in the sticks
in
like
the middle
you
of nowhere.
Yeah. So if I see something, I can't just be like, if turkeys are in my backyard, I can't be like, hey, I got dinner now. I'm gonna go shoot these guys. So it's in the middle, kind of developed area. And so I'm walking, and I hear this like this noise. And there's a baby raccoon running in these circles in this driveway across the street. So it's around like 30 feet from me and my dog. And then I see the big mama raccoon come from the backyard. This thing was almost and I have pit bulls. I have a little small pit bull female and then a larger male one. I mean, this raccoon was almost this was the biggest raccoon I've ever seen. I don't know if it's just because it had just like such a thick fur coat or what it was, but it was huge. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go.
Did it see you?
It like was looking at us because I think it was a mama raccoon. And well, what am I gonna do? I can't shoot it or anything. It's in a neighbor's yard. I'm like, well, if I don't want my dog.
Yeah, get out of there.
A tussle with this thing. So I'm gonna turn around now.
Those mama raccoons are extremely protective of their young, and when you don't want to piss them off. Yeah, you really don't, because they have teeth. They can scratch you. One of the gentlemen that I worked with at News Radio Wham 1180 years and years ago was a guy named David McKinley, and Dave went on to be a TV reporter in Buffalo for one of the Buffalo stations. And I remember him doing a live story back in the day where he was narrating this lady was in her front yard doing some gardening, and a raccoon came up and started just attacking her. And Dave's there as she laid there in the yard, the raccoon gnawing on her leg,
Oh, my God.
I remember laughing my head off. But, it's just one of those things. You just try to beat it off, and then you head right to the hospital for rabies shots. I mean,
They do that stuff in your stomach. Well, they say that. That's like a wives' tale, isn't
they
that?
They don't do that anymore. But they do certain muscle groups. Uh-huh. And it's like any time you're getting a shot, it's uncomfortable. I mean, nobody wants to get shots. But it's very effective. The antidotes are great. Mm-hmm. The vaccines are figured out. The problem is once the animal's dead a period of time, they can't test it for rabies. Mm-hmm. So they really need it harvested right away, or the best thing to do is capture it fresh and let them deal with it. Yep. And then they can get right into the brain and figure out whether it had rabies. So that's a nasty, nasty disease.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And every once in a while, I'm driving down the road, and there's a mouse running in a 3-foot circle in the street. Uh-huh. Now something's going on there.
I mean, that's a normal activity. That's how I felt with that one baby raccoon running around. I don't want this. I don't want my dog, because my dog will run after it. He has like really strong hunting instincts. He sees something, he sees a squirrel, he wants to go running after it. Sometimes I'll let him. He almost caught one once. Almost. It wiggled out of his mouth.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
It wiggled out of his mouth. I think it's like a dog that catches it chases after a car, doesn't know what it's going to get when it doesn't know what's going to do if it actually got one. I think that's how he was with the squirrel. He's like, oh, I actually got it, and it wiggled out of his mouth. So.
I think, we'd be remiss in our discussion of pests in the house if we didn't talk about rats.
Yes.
Anything but rats. I mean, rats are filthy. People that have rats for pets need
Huge.
psychological evaluation. I mean, they really.
Those things, it just a long tail,
Yeah.
I just think of the tail and just it's just how big they are. I mean, mice, okay, they're these little guys, you'll catch them with the little trap or the glue or whatever, the bait. But a rat, you see those rat traps. Huge. I mean, it's like, what is it? It must be like 8 by like 3 inches or something,
they're
those
big.
traps.
Yeah. Rats aren't all that stupid either. I mean, sometimes they figure the traps out. Sometimes they don't. I shoot them. I shoot them right out the window. I blew the windowsill apart once. This is another whole
I can
long
see what
story.
your wife would say to you.
She every once in a while, when she gets really pissed at me, she'll open that window and say, "See that hole? That's a beautiful brand new vinyl replacement with a hole in the sill."
What did you use? You used like a 22 or
I was using a
something?
22 with a scope.
Yeah.
And I was inside, and the rat was right out there under the bird feeder. And I aimed down, and the scope threw me off a couple inches, and I blew a hole in the sill. So, of course, I missed the rat.
That's funny.
Fortunately, we had a farm for years across the street from my house, a working dairy farm. They were milking 100 cows or whatever, and they had silos and corn and all that. And those things are just the perfect storm of what a rat needs to live high on the hog.
Exactly. They have
No
all the
pun
food
intended.
they need. They got the shelter and everything. Yeah.
So I come home one day. The guy sold the cows, sold the land to a quarry, and they burnt the house down, took all the stuff away. And where'd all the rats go? Over to my house.
Your house, yep.
At one point, one night, my son Jamie and I were going to go out and hunt rats because there were some in this old barn we had. Went out there at night, shined a flashlight, and there were millions of them. And they were going like worms.
Oh, it's like
my
you
God.
flash the flashlight, they all kind of
Right.
scatter kind of deal, or they're just like, bold, screw you, I don't care.
I told him, I said, buddy, we can't hunt rats because we'll just blow holes in everything. I mean, no matter where we shoot. So
You
what
have
I
to
did
aim.
is I went on a bait thing.
Yep.
And I baited that whole barn, and we were finding rat carcasses for months. Poison is the best way, but you have to be very careful that you don't bait where dogs and cats can get to it. I mean, if you care about that.
Yes. And actually, the thing you bring up about dogs and cats, that's one of the things that bring in a lot of the critters is their food. So if you have like their food just sitting on the floor there, my dog does this thing where he'll take a bite of food, he'll eat some of it, but then he spits a little out. And he spits it on the floor. And then, okay, what's that going to attract? That's going to attract the ants. That's going to attract the mice. So you got to have something where you got to have like their food elevated or like on a pad or something, or you just got to be proactive with it and clean it up. Yeah.
Dogs and cats living together. I have videos because we live out in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
I have videos of one of those round hog feeder pans with cat food in it or dog food or both. And 3 or 4 cats there, a raccoon and a possum. All in there eating at the same time.
They don't care.
It's like they don't. And you're right. They'll attract all kinds of pests. And their goal, especially in September, is to get into your house.
They need to get warm.
Yep.
Yeah, they're thinking about when winter comes.
They spend their whole life procreating and searching for food. So
Now, have you seen, and I know this is probably more of like down south, you'll see more cockroaches. I've seen a lot of cockroaches like down south, but have you seen a lot here? I haven't seen too many unless it's a really bad place.
I find a lot in the city.
Yep. I that's the only place where and in the really bad parts of the city.
And when cockroaches are in a house, they're everywhere. And if I see one, I know that there's an issue. And they live in the smallest places. They live between the range hood and the bottom of that cabinet. They're behind and on top and behind the stove, the refrigerator, any little area of the band joist area in the basement. And it sometimes can be daunting to it can be a couple of grand to treat for cockroaches.
Oh yeah, I believe that. It's not just the typical 300 or whatever for mice that you'd typically see. So yeah, I've heard nightmare stories about that too.
And then on top of all that, there's bed bugs. Bed bugs are the most annoying thing. Especially, I have some friends that are in the landlord business.
Yep.
And the bed bugs, be in one apartment and they
they'll
go nuts
into
on
the
the
other. And even after you say evict that one tenant, they're still going to be in there. There's still a very good chance that they'll be there.
Oftentimes, you can't figure out what tenant it is either. If it's in, and then of course they all lie to you and they say,
"Oh, it's
they're
not me."
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So you go in there and you lift up, you look under the couch and there's a bed bug treatment thing there.
Yep.
So when you get involved in carpenter ant infestations, termite infestations, bed bugs, stuff like that, it's best to involve an exterminator. Believe me, I lived my whole life trying to be a do-it-yourselfer guy, but when it comes to that stuff, it's really important.
I definitely agree. When you start talking, especially with bed bugs, cockroaches, some of these other critters, you just get an exterminator. Sometimes you can DIY it, but don't expect it to actually work every single time.
Then I know we're getting close to the end of this podcast, but I wanted to talk a minute about bats.
Bats
all over the place.
Oh yeah,
in the city of Rochester, in the big chimneys, in these old houses.
I'll see them in attics.
All kinds of bats.
I'll see them in attics a lot too. Yep.
Bats are a good thing for the environment. They eat a lot of insects. They do have an occasional rabies issue, I think. They also have some kind of mite thing that's reducing the population right now.
Are they really going to cause damage to the house, or is it just kind of a nuisance? It's like,
bats don't really touch the house except for getting in it.
Yeah.
I
mean,
they're in attics.
I'll see them like kind of like near the gutter or something, and they're just chilling, just clamped on there, just kind of doing their thing. It's like, well, do your thing, bat. As long as you're not destroying my house. You know?
Don't want them in the house.
Yeah.
Because of the rabies thing. I mean, you just never know. We've had bats in our house for a long time, and it's all about exclusion. It's an old house. There's plenty of holes, and as we've sided it and spray foamed it and all that stuff, we have pretty much excluded all the bats. Bats are easy to find out where they are because in the morning, or just as it's starting to get light, they come back.
Yep.
Because they've been out all night. And you stand outside your house and you just sometimes
you have a light on, you could see them.
Yeah. You can
I remember
see them coming
as a kid, we'd have them kind of near our house, and they'd be flying around right at dusk. And I'd throw a rock up or something. Yeah. And they'd all come right at the rock. They're thinking it's like a bug or something.
Giant bug,
yeah. And then they realize it's not and fly off,
So the thing with bats is that you try to exclude them the best you can. I remember when I went from the old siding I had on my house to beautiful vinyl siding, the guy started in the front and he's working his way around kind of clockwise. And he said, I'm going to be over on this side where the chimney is, and I know there's bats and stuff in there because we've seen them coming and going. He said, you got about 2 days before I get over there to get those bats out of there. So what I did was I took a tarp and I nailed it onto the roof, and it hung down on that side.
Yep.
So the bats would come out.
And they would just hit the tarp.
Run into the tarp and drop down. The cats would line up like taxis at the airport, and they'd pick them off and whatever.
That's clever.
And some of
them
them would
never thought of that.
Yeah, it works well. But there's always not a perfect science. There were a few of them that got sided in.
Yeah, some of them were probably like, not going to fall for that. Yeah.
So it's pretty funny.
That's clever. And then the cats just dispatch them. There you go.
Yeah. And I don't know what a bat tastes like, but I'm not interested in finding out either. So I think we pretty much exhausted our conversation on pests, huh?
Yep. I think we have.
This is the houseatwork.com home repair clinic podcast. Jim Salmon and Peter Schick. We do have an email address if you'd like to write in and suggest a topic to talk about or something you'd like us to visit, or you have a specific question about something. Our goal is to get you to say something that'll ruin your life, and, it's all good. But we'll be glad to help you out, and Peter's going to tell you how to get a hold of us.
Yeah, go ahead and email us at contactus@houseatwork.com.
All right, we'll see you on the next houseatwork.com home repair podcast. Thanks. At the end, I think we're done.
Yeah.
But we'll see you next time on Down the Line, another podcast. Thanks for listening.
All right, have a good one.